The New York Jets are collecting talent on both sides of the ball at an alarming rate, and already had a top 5 defense last year. Putting Aaron Rodgers, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, only a year removed from an MVP season, and a couple of his favorite targets on the offense is inspiring whispers about a dream team forming in the Meadowlands. The term dream team gets thrown around in conversations about talented sports teams all the time. The popular phrase obviously comes from the beloved 1992 U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, featuring the likes of my GOAT, Michael Jordan, the new minority owner of my Washington Commanders, Magic Johnson, and other incredible Hall of Famers like Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, and Patrick Ewing. That team earned its name and will be what all future dream teams are compared to. The most recent example in the NFL of a group of players referring to themselves with this moniker was the 2011 Philadelphia Eagles. Their backup quarterback sealed the team's and eventually his own fate with a quick 2-word answer in response to a question about all the talent the Eagles had added in the offseason.
Oh, dream team.
That team went on to finish 8-8, and that was the last season that Vince Young ever played in the NFL. Now that claim was a little outlandish and everyone kind of knew it immediately. This Jets team feels different though. First off, nobody within the Jets organization has declared themselves a dream team. They've just built a roster with recognizable names who are primarily still in their prime, and have a coach who appears to be moving his team in the right direction. The Jets roster is one of the most talented in the league, and they might not even be done adding to it this season. The rebuild all started with one of the best drafts by an NFL team that we've seen in recent memory. Out of the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jets traded around to come away with the Defensive Rookie of the Year in Sauce Gardner, as well as the Offensive Rookie of the Year in Garrett Wilson. This made the Jets just the third team in the history of the awards to have players from their team win both. Gardner was far and away the best acquisition from the draft, as he was being regarded in the top 5 at his position in the entire league as a rookie. Some might argue he uses his hands a little more than he should be allowed to get away with, but you can't deny that he slows down the other team's best receiver week in and week out. Wilson has proven to be a surefire number 1 receiver with top 10 wide receiver in the league type ceiling. He was incredibly productive as a rookie while receiving passes from the likes of Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco. They also used their 3rd pick in the round to grab Jermaine Johnson. The stats aren't quite there for him yet, but he has a high ceiling and should get more opportunities this season. Outside of the first round, they were also able to select the top running back in the class, Breece Hall. Prior to a season-ending injury, Hall was on pace to be well over 1,000 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. He wasn't even the starter for the first 5 games of the season. He'll see his role increase this year and explode for some big-time yardage. Michael Clemens was drafted in the 4th round and showed some flashes while earning 2.5 sacks. To come out of a single draft with 2 stars, 1 possible star and surefire starter, and 2 solid contributors, any team would be incredibly excited. They followed last year's draft up with what appears to be a strong 2023 class. They addressed some positions of need and really put value in the trenches. Will McDonald was taken in the 1st round and looks to be a very high floor pass rusher. Then in the 2nd and 4th rounds, they took offensive linemen. Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin is probably an immediate starter. They also took a 5th round flyer on Israel Abanikanda, who led the NCAA in scoring with 21 total touchdowns last season. He was also 2nd in all-purpose yards per game and 7th in rush yards per game. He brings a wealth of production and versatility to the Jets' backfield. Without ever seeing it down, it feels like the Jets made smart decisions with this class. They'll be strong support players for the stars they drafted last year and those that they added this offseason through free agency and trades. So before we get to the biggest move of the offseason, let's look at their great signings in free agency. I love when a team knows exactly what they're looking for and go out and get it. They wanted to rebuild their wide receiver room around Garrett Wilson, so Elijah Moore was becoming a distraction in the locker room, so he was traded to the Browns. They traded away Denzel Mims as well because of the talent that they were able to add. First, they signed Allen Lazard. He's a big body wide receiver who is coming off his best year yet. He had 60 receptions for nearly 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. Great numbers for a wide receiver too, especially when you consider that he missed 2 games. Next, they went out and got a speedster in Mecole Hardman. He wasn't re-signed in Kansas City and decided to test the market. He has a high ceiling for a team-friendly dollar amount, so it could turn into something special if it all connects. Finally, the Jets did a solid for their soon-to-be starting quarterback by bringing in Randall Cobb. Even in his 30s, Cobbs is still a contributor. He's a great leader in the locker room and knows his role in the slot. They also knew they would need some more depth and talent on the offensive line. Aside from the rookies, they also signed a couple of veterans who would provide competition for the starting job. Depth is important all over the field, but possibly more important on the O-line than anywhere else. Their first signing was Tristan Colon from the Ravens. He spot started for the first 3 years, but was very highly ranked on PFF, whatever that's worth to you. They also re-signed Blank Hance and Connor McGovern, their starting center. Great news for their future starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. More on him soon though, I promise. But first, the offense wasn't all they helped in free agency. The biggest contract, both financially and in significance, was that of Quinnen Williams. He becomes one of the top 3 highest paid D tackles in the league, honestly, what he's worth, and stays happy and motivated in New York. He's such a disruptive player in all aspects of the defense that the importance of signing him long term cannot be overstated. He anchors the defense, helps the edge rushers get home because the quarterback can't step up into a comfortable pocket, and makes the corners not have to cover nearly as long. They also brought in Quentin Jefferson to back up Williams. He's a veteran who is coming off his best statistical season last year in Seattle. Not as many signings, but not as much of a need for sure because they already had so much talent, like all-pro middle linebacker CJ Mosley. If Williams is the anchor, then Mosley is the engine. He's the ever-present signal-calling, tackling machine in the middle of the Jets' elite defense. Mosley is always available, always around the ball, and puts his teammates in positions to make the best play. He stops the run and covers tight ends and running backs. He's on the field nearly every single play, and in a league where the linebacker is being undervalued and underutilized, he's a throwback-type player who makes it impossible to take him off the field. He and the rest of his talented friends in the defense are going to make the offense and Mr. Rodgers' job far easier. So, how about Aaron Rodgers? He's easily the biggest name as a 100% lock, first-ballot Hall of Famer. He's following in his Green Bay predecessor Brett Favre's footsteps, going from Green Bay to New York. But I think his time in New York could be far more successful and hopefully have fewer scandals. It took him going on a darkness retreat and drinking some ayahuasca tea for him to decide he even wanted to play football again this season. Then there was the process of informing the Packers that he'd like to be traded and giving them his options, or perhaps singular option, of where he'd be willing to play and sign a new contract. Granted, prior to him making a decision about playing, the Packers seemed to have already decided that they were moving forward with Jordan Love for better or for worse, probably in order to avoid having to go through this charade every offseason. But even after everyone around the league knew that Rodgers was going to be a Jet or he wouldn't be playing at all, the Packers still were trying to milk the Jets for every last drop of draft capital. To me, essentially swapping first this year and giving up one next year for likely 2 to 3 years of Aaron Rodgers is an easy decision. The bottom line, though, is he makes the Jets team an immediate Super Bowl contender. The Jets were 29th in the league in points per game last season and time of possession, yet somehow they were second in the league in points allowed. Now, you add Aaron Rodgers to the mix. Even on one of the most injured and least talented rosters he's ever been a part of last year, Rodgers led the Packers to 14th in the league in points per game and 8th in the league in time of possession. If he can just match those rankings this season with a more talented team, then the Jets are making the playoffs. His grasp of offensive schemes, especially the one being implemented by his former quarterback coach, is unmatched. He will have the Jets in the best possible situation on nearly every down. Another massive upgrade that Rodgers brings is his innate ability to take care of the ball. In his 18 years in the league, he has thrown double-digit interceptions only 3 times. As long as he maintains that standard and doesn't give opposing teams short fields, then the Jets' defense should be able to hold opposing teams to low scores again. Green Bay allowed 21 points per game to opponents and were 1 game out of the playoffs. Imagine what Rodgers can do with this roster and a defense holding the opponent to 18 points per game like the Jets did last year. The Super Bowl is the ceiling for the Jets. The floor? Well, they're still the Jets, so you tell me.